them to turn on. Hey everyone, welcome to the North American Congress for Conservation Biology 2024. One of our opening ceremony presenters is stuck in traffic and we're going to start in about 10 minutes. So I just want to let you know that we are almost ready to go, but continue chatting and finding your spot, but about 10 minutes we'll get going. Thank you. again, everyone. We will get started here in just a second. We're waiting for some of our performers just to finalize some final parts of their presentation. They're going to be coming in just a second. So everyone can start taking their seats, and we will get started in just 1 second once they come in the back doors here. So go ahead. If you're in the back, take a seat, or if you feel like standing, great, but maybe just move away from a couple of the doors. Thank you. But you can keep talking. I'll let you know. You'll hear me again when you should stop talking. Okay. All right, this will be the official welcome. We are going to get started now. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. So I'm going to officially welcome you to the North American Congress for Conservation Biology 2024. My name is Becky Huft, and I'm the current president of SCB&A. SCB&A is dedicated to advancing the science and practice of conserving Earth's biological diversity. And the goal of this conference is to provide a forum for presenting and discussing new research, developments, and strategies that will inform policy changes and conservation practices to address today's conservation challenges. I just realized. Can I advance this way on the slides, or are you advancing for me? This. Maybe. There we go. We'll work out the kinks today. Okay. So first, I'd like to acknowledge our logo designer, Sage Paul, who is a Coast Salish artist and created our logo design with the theme of celebrating diversity, conservation from summit to the sea. So our theme reflects the urgency of the current times, addressing both conservation biology and our commitment to fostering more equitable, inclusive, and diverse field of conservation practitioners. We are here at the University of British Columbia and the City of Vancouver on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, specifically here at UBC Vancouver campus as on Musqueam lands. In addition to my service on the SCB&A board, I'm a conservation biologist, mother, daughter, and wife. I live in Denver, Colorado in the United States on the traditional and unceded territories of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho, and 48 contemporary indigenous tribes and nations who historically called Colorado home. As you participate in the Congress this week, I encourage you to bring your authentic self. The many sessions and 3 plenaries highlight the importance of each of us telling our own story and listening to others. I think we all know that life can be full of contradictions, and while we should all try to look with an honest eye to make things better, let's also acknowledge the good that is happening around us, including the fact that we are all here in person together. So in addition to learning new facts and skills, I hope that you meet new people, make new connections, feel, reflect, and be curious. I would like to acknowledge our generous sponsors, without whom we could not have made this conference happen. Thank you to all of your generous support. I would also like to acknowledge our local organizing committee and several organizations who have provided a lot of in-kind contributions to make this event happen. If you are on the board or the local organizing committee or one of these in-kind meetings, could you raise your hand, or stand if you're able, raise your hand. So thank you to all of you for helping organize this conference. And a few special people I wanted to give a special thanks to. So Bernie Travisari is our Director of Operations and Programs at SCB&A, and he is the reason almost all the fine details of this entire conference have happened. So if you see Bernie, if you feel appropriate, maybe hug him, shake his hand, thank him, whatever you feel is appropriate, or that Bernie feels is appropriate. Thank Bernie, because he's the reason we are all here, and we thank him. We have also had two great communications interns this past year. So Jules was our previous intern, and Lisa you will see here at the conference. Lisa, is Lisa here? She might be down at the registration desk still, probably, yes. So when you see Lisa, know that she is really heading up a lot of the details with Bernie, as well as sending out all the communications that you receive from the conference as well. So thank you to both of them. Our former Director of Operations, Megan, was really the one that helped us get this whole site selected, pick the Nest as the venue. And as she transitioned to a new job, and Bernie came on just a year ago, she has continued to work with us to make that transition happen smoothly, and I really appreciate Megan's contributions. And lastly, Leanne and Isabella here on site with the conference planning and the Nest have really been helpful as well. So thank you to them. So I also just want to highlight some key aspects that you'll see in the schedule, some of which are new this year. So specifically want to call out the Indigenous-led conservation and transformational learning pieces that we now have at the conference. So first of all, please, Isak Olin Foundation has been working with us and is planning a lot of the events that will happen on Wednesday, so please also check out their booth downstairs on the lower level. Tomorrow there will be a session on Indigenous perspectives on ecological corridors and connectivity. Wednesday there's quite a few events. There's a plenary, a celebration, and a film festival, all happening on Wednesday. So please check out your schedule and attend those. Lastly, throughout the entire conference, we have several sessions that we hope you will interact with others, reflect, and get out in nature. And be creative. So I hope that you also look at those different types of activities, and maybe if it's something new and uncomfortable, maybe try it out and do something new here. So as we move now on to the rest of our actual opening ceremony and some amazing performance from our visitors today, I would like to also say that what's going to happen now is we're going to finish out, we're having an opening ceremony. That will then transition into an opening plenary. We're hoping to finish that up by 8, and then we'll actually move upstairs, and then we'll have a reception with food and drinks as well. So, and we'll give some more details on the logistics of that at the end, but just to kind of give you a roadmap of where we're going. All right, so now I would like to introduce our speaker, our first speaker this evening, and performer for the opening ceremony. Deanna Lewis is a member of the Squamish people and embodies the roles of educator, entrepreneur, and cultural ambassador. As the Squamish Nation owner of KC Kalkalai Communications, she channels her ancestral name to bridge cultures and communities. With 4 years of service on the Squamish Nation Council, Deanna is also recognized for her expertise as a cultural awareness and gender safety facilitator. Alongside her creative pursuits as an artist, Deanna's most important role is being a mother to 3 beautiful children and a foster parent. Tonight she will be joined by a group of dancers that have a lifetime of dancing and singing experience, but this will be the group's first performance together. Please welcome Deanna and the beating of the unborn history. Beating drum of the unborn history, excuse me.
Hot Squile Tanoya, Nithlin Cocklaith Quishami, Deanna Lewis Queen Snas, Tanachantla Chiakmas Asanach Ochomeo, Skohotmish Oath, Chenkomentomi, Kayachtin, Kayachtin. Can you say Kayachtin? It means welcome. We really do. If you go through all of our Coast Salish territory, we have welcome figures, and our hands are all the welcome figures have things like this on them. Can you do this gesture? It's saying that we didn't catch a fish that big. But we were saying that, from my heart to you, we welcome you. From my heart to you, we give thanks. And we have our hands facing inward, so we're saying that there's no harm to you if you come into our territory and our lands. My ancestral name is Cocklith, which means the cannibal woman, the big woman from the mountains. Does anyone know this legend of the big woman from the mountains? Hands up. Yes. There's many villages along the coast of British Columbia, all the way into the States even, of a cannibal woman that would steal children that wander from the village. Now, I'm not going to eat anybody. I actually earned that name from my canoe family when I was 17 years old. And I paddle in our traditional waters here. They say our rivers and our lakes and our oceans are our roads and highways, and that our canoes are our Cadillacs. And so it's really important to know our ancient ways of travel. It shows our connection to our relatives along the coast. It teaches us about the songs and the lands that you're paddling through. And I always tell everybody at one point in their life, if you're Coast Salish, to go on some of our canoe journeys. We have journeys, we have pulling together, and that's what the RCMP and DFO, fisheries officers, and we're building up relationships. But really, it's about connecting our own children and our community to our waters, to our rightful place. And when we're talking about protecting those lands and waters, it's important that we're utilizing them as well. We're not just saying that we used to do these things. We still do them today. If you see our regalia, it shows the paddles of how the cedar and the canoe is so important to us. And you see it in all our clothing. I said I'm from Chiakamish, which means the fisher people. All my uncles and aunties, they're all fishermen. I'm the flayer. I do all the smoked fish and everything. Everyone has their role they play. And but I also say I'm from Sanok, which is here in Kitsilano. We moved within the seasons. And so right now we'd just be going up to our spring-summer home in Chiakamish, because that's where they're all fishing right now. And I'm really proud to be Squamish Nation. And I have my family here with me. I need to explain a little bit of the name of our dance group. We've all performed within our culture our whole lives. But we wanted to have a showcase of our dances and our songs. And it's called The Beat and Drum of the Unborn History. And there's songs that we have, and we're going to sing some of those today, that are hundreds of years old. And there was a reason we sang those songs then. Prayer songs. We have songs about being on the canoe, keeping morale, keeping time in. So we have many journey songs and family songs. We have songs of prayer of different things that we've been going through to heal ourselves. And I am a composer of songs. I've composed 7 songs now, and they're songs of relearning our language, because it was almost lost to us. Even when I was a child, I didn't even know I was Indigenous, because we didn't hear any language. I didn't see any artwork. You wouldn't see any of this stuff. And I'm not that old, so it wasn't that long ago. And amazing to know that when I found out I was Indigenous, I was like, I said, how come I don't know any language? And my grandfather went to residential school, and he said, I didn't want to teach my children. I didn't want them to go through what I went through. And so we're relearning how to nurture and love our children and each other. So I have songs of saying, I love my mom, I love my dad, I love my aunties, my uncles. And I'm teaching them, our own people, to how to say our parents, our grandchildren in our own language. I have lullabies. I have friendship songs, because your friends are your chosen family. I even have a COVID-19 prayer song, because I had COVID and I literally went to the river. They say all our songs come from the water. And a song came to me, and we're going to sing that song tonight, because I know how it affected everyone around the world. And so we're going to sing it today for the first time. I and we even do solos in it, so it's going to be quite interesting. We got this, right, guys? And but really, the songs reflect a lot of who we are, and the messages that we're trying to give today about loving ourselves and celebrating too. I have a celebration song. And don't think you guys are off the hook, because you guys are going to be dancing too. So don't be shy when one of my children asks you to come and dance with us, okay? Because this is a really good time as people. Can you say stomach? Stomach is human being in our language. We don't have any other word for any other nationality or race. We're the two-legged. All of us are stomach. That was the first word I ever learned in Skohotmashnecham. My grandfather was my teacher, and I knew, he's on my arm right here, him and my grandma. I literally say I wear them on my sleeve, and I really do. Before we start our songs and welcoming you formally, I'm going to get my children to introduce themselves to you. Oh, we're going to start from that.
Hot squal, no choch min wahath, hot salanoch tananoch quishamen, shalin quishamen, chen wa squahotmish oath, siechem ochumeo, hamalchasin ochumeo, amonox tin squalowin, chenquim mentomi. Good day, everyone. My ancestral name is Hatzalanoch Tinanoch, and I share that with my late uncle Alec Williams from the Squamish Valley. My English name is Nolan Rutkowski, however. I share another name with my late grandfather named, that was Chalin. He comes from the Squamish Valley as well. So I'm born and raised on a small little fishing village on the Squamish River. It's called Sietchum in Brackendale. Currently live in North Vancouver and Capilano. I still practice the culture to this day. I'm an avid dancer. I do Coast dancing. I do pow dancing as well. Don't have much else to share about myself other than I hope you guys enjoy the entertainment tonight, and I hope you guys can take something home. Thank you.
Hot squile. Hot squile. Qualeus Queensna. Trachintra. Chiakmis. Okmeo Anunan Senswellen. Chuckamatomia.
Say it in the mic.
Chenquamatomia.
Good job. Yay, give her a hand. That's her first time. Woo!
Hot squirrel, Queensna, Holitz Tanat. Hello, good day, everybody. My ancestral name is Holitz Tanat, which I share with Saxon Jacobs and Stuart Jacobs, my uncle and my grandfather, and my English name is Saraya Jacobs Green. I'm 10 years old and I come from the Squamish and Stalo nations. I've been doing performances since I was the age of 3 years old. Currently, I'm standing here today proudly representing the Skohotmish Nation Veterans Princess. As this isn't the topic, but I would like to invite you all to the Capilano Youth 2024-2025 Youth Powwow. I'd like to thank you all for letting us all, July 5th to 7th in Capilano. I'd like to thank you all for letting us share our medicine with you all today. Hachka.
So just for the record, this is like quarter of our dance group. A lot of them couldn't get off work before 5 o'clock today, and they live in many different parts of Vancouver and Squamish Valley. So they really wanted to be here tonight. But on Wednesday, when we do the Nachana celebration, we're going to have all our dancers there. And we even have some masks that we're pulling out, and more dancers to sing for us, sing and dance with us. And so we're quite excited. We initially are going to be doing a full showcase of a move and art exhibit. And so you would go up to a photo. I make all the regalia that you see, not this one, but I do a lot of wool regalia. And I made this when I was 17, but I have many clothing, mostly wool and cedar. And so you would go up to one of the art pieces, and then there's a QR code, and then all of a sudden my 26-year-old daughter will pull up, and she'll be like, Kayach, and she'll talk about the regalia that she's wearing, or she'll be dancing in that regalia. And you'll see it in a move and exhibit through the QR codes. And it's going to be amazing, but this is our first kind of like crack at doing some live performances. So thank you for humbling us today with this honor. And again, in my Squamish language, the name of our dance group is called Manatsem Tuchnukneo Te Aquiles, the beat and drum of the unborn history. And so the first song we want to do for you, I really wanted to honor one of my friends. His name's Sesayam, Chief Ray Naturo. He is a composer of songs as well, and he was the one that inspired me to even compose. I said, if he could compose a song, I can. And I just came back from my brother's wedding, actually, and I was singing a song because I sang my brother's wife down the aisle at their wedding. So I was all in a hype from singing, and I was singing Ray's song of this journey song. It's about two spirits coming together as one. And I could proudly say I've probably sang about 10 people down the aisle now. And so this song inspired me to even be a composer of songs. And so our dancers are going to come, and they're going to dance up and around here, and they're going to pull you into the audience and paddle with us. And it's just like this. You just paddle. Okay? So this is Ray Naturo's paddle song. Yeah, I know. I need someone to hold this. Can I use a stand or? Perfect. Thank you. Because I'm the only one singing, so. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, you guys are ready? All right, here we go. Ahia ho. Ahia ho. Hia ho. Ahia. Hia ho. Ahia. Hia ho. Ahia ho. Okay, you guys all heard the song. Can you guys sing with me? Hia ho. Ahia. Hia ho. Ahia. Hia ho. Ahia ho. I know you guys aren't shy. You can sing louder than that. Ready? Hia ho. Ahia. Hia ho. Ahia. Hia ho. Ahia ho. Ooh. Yes, sir. Good job. You guys didn't pull anyone up to dance with me. All right, okay, we all got to go on tour now. That was great. But they say when you sing together and you're drumming together, that we have one heart, one spirit, that we're all on the same page. We hear that when we go to powwows and different gatherings, when you're singing together. And it's the same thing when you're feasting together. So this is our sla'ash and our feast together, a celebration. And that was her first time dancing to that song, so that was great. Thank you. Do you want to sing a song now, a prayer song?
Sure.
Okay, all right, so. Okay, one sec. Coming out? Here we go. There we go. All right. So this song is a COVID prayer song. I did this song because this was a time of the whole world was shut down. The airports were shut down. The food wasn't coming in, supplies, and a lot of people were getting sick. And I had a reunion I just met my dad a few years ago. It's actually 4 years. On June 20th was the first time I had my dad in my arms for the first time. I looked for him all my life. And we had a gathering for him at my house, at my auntie's house. And we're having a reunion July 13th. It's been 50 years that my grandmother hasn't been on this earth. She was only 44 years old. She was murdered in the downtown east side. And a lot of the work I do is about gender safety, about MMIWG. And I talk with businesses, government, big industrial corporations that have male-dominant industries. And I talk about the importance when you come into our community that our women are most vulnerable. Because of residential school and the intergenerational traumas, we have suffered so much. And so even in our own families, our women were taught, and trained to feel less than. And so if we invite other people around us outside of our community and we're being drawn to those same negative things. So we're trying to break those things and bring awareness to our own people to empower them that they're important. And my dad actually didn't even know about me. I knew about him my whole life, but because of the women's status laws, my mom didn't tell him about me. They were just dating and stuff, and he's Irish and Scottish and Welsh. And I'm just like him, isn't that hilarious? But when I met my dad and we brought him to welcome him into our family, he was gonna sing. And before he sang, he said, I go to all these, worked in these mining camps all over Canada. And there was a high population of Indigenous people at these, in and around the mining camps. He saw sex trafficking. He saw, he said that he'd see families that were plagued with losing their loved ones. They were missing and they were murdered. And he said it didn't just affect that family, it would affect the whole community. And me and my whole family were listening to him speak. And he said it was his dream to sing with a band. And I said, I have friends with bands. And so my dear friends from Bitterly Divine came, and they indulged my dad to sing with them. And he sang Bill Withers' Ain't No Sunshine. So he was like, ain't no sunshine when she's gone. And he made us all weep, you know. And, but when we were doing that, it was COVID times. So it was a party under 50 people, outdoors. My mom couldn't even come because she has medical issues. She's in a wheelchair. She got run over by a truck, actually, and broke every bone in her body a year before COVID hit. And she got out of the hospital in the midst of COVID. And I said, you should have stayed in the hospital because there's going to be no one to be able to watch you. Like, you know, it was basically me and a few other people that had to look after her. But 4 or 5 of us got COVID. I was one of them. And I said, if anyone's going to get it, it's me, because I was the one, you know, introducing everyone to my dad. And, you know, there was quite, you know, big restrictions for us to even have that. And there was only 37 of us there. The band was way away from us, you know, everything. But, you know, it still happened, you know. And so anyways, while I was in quarantine, I went to the river. And I started, you know, I couldn't be around anybody else. And I was saying, you know, the song that I share with you now is a song that the first verse is saying that we've all are affected by COVID-19, and that, you know, how the world was shut down and everything. And that this ain't the first time for our Indigenous people that we've had epidemics. We've had smallpox, influenzas, we have a word in our language for, you know, this too shall pass too, that this sickness is coming through. And so we're used to it, and we've prepared for it, and we have gotten through it before. So the second verse is about honoring all the people we did lose. And so we kind of whisper. I don't know how to whisper, so I kind of hum. So you can whisper and hum along with me if you like. And then the third verse is, we all got through this. You know, we survived this as a people, as our Stomach people, our human race. And so we sing it super loud. And then every one of us here are going to sing a verse by ourselves, and to honor our own individual struggles. Because I know a lot of people are still struggling about being able to socialize again. How do we hang out with people again? How do we go to work again? I still know people that are still scared to leave their house. And it didn't affect my son. He's a gamer, so he was like, I'm used to this. But there was some serious crises to that. And so we want to individually honor everyone that has gone through this. And so, and if you feel like you want to sing a verse, put your hand up and we'll let you sing. Okay? It's just one verse over and over again, so it's quite easy. You guys ready? Can you move forward? Okay, I don't want to whack you with my drum. Here we go. We were practicing it on the way here, by the way. Here we go. Whoa, oh, 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 oh.
Oh ho, oh ho, oh ho, oh ho.
One of you guys want to go? Everybody. Oh ho. Oh ho. Oh ho. Oh ho. Oh ho. All right. Oh, this just warms my heart so much. I have two older children that are 25 and 26, and they were like, they're coming on Wednesday, but they were like, we've done our time. They've been on tour with me for years. And so they were saying the young one's got to come up. And so this one's my youngest daughter. She's 10 years old. And Soraya, my niece, her mother is one of my best friends. And I used to babysit her mother, by the way, when she was little. And so she's my baby too. So that's why I say they're my family, and they're 1 month apart in age. They're literally 1 month apart. Yeah. And I've known Nolan his whole life too. He's lived down the road from me his whole life. We're not related, but down the road, they say how we're all related. But he also played soccer for me since he was really little. And we've traveled over and won many championships, tournaments, Indigenous tournaments. And I always say, if you're healthy within, that's my only wish for all of us, is to be healthy within. And I know for myself, sport and my culture saved me. When you talk about living a certain lifestyle, we always say it's so easy to be bad, and it's so hard to be good. So if you're doing something that just comes easy, you're like, oh, what am I doing wrong? Because that good stuff, it takes work, and it's hard to do. It's hard to live this lifestyle that we have, because it's important to learn how we take care of our regalia, how we take care of our own spirit, how we hold our drum and look after our drum. With the next song we're gonna do, we're gonna get you guys up and dancing. Do you guys want to do the Jimmy Jimmy now? Okay. So we're gonna break it up. Yeah. Yes. All right. Okay, so where you're sitting now, you're gonna get up and dance certain animals. Or they can be where they're standing. So this is a dry run for Wednesday, because my older daughter's like gonna run the show on Wednesday. But we wanted to do a dance for all of us to get up and dance. And so, because I feel like, this is a celebration for all of us here today as our Stonewall people. So this song is called Chief Jimmy Jimmy. And this is a chief that's up on our village, up by 16 Mile, actually, where he lived. He was one of my distant relatives. He was my great-grandfather's brother. And Chief Jimmy Jimmy, when we'd go to celebrations, he would call up every village. I don't know where you're all from. So what we'll do is we're going to break up into animals sections, okay? So the first animal all the way over to the right, that whole big section there where the chairs divide you, you're going to be the Spakwas. Can you say Spakwas? Girls, show the eagle. How you dance the eagle? So we're not seagulls. We're not swapping our arms like this. It's out. They're just soaring around. Okay. And if you can sound like an eagle, go ahead. And then the middle rows here, all in the middle here, up to these guys, all that big row. You guys are going to be the yo-yos, the killer whale. Show the killer whale, girls. And if you really feel like a whale, you can go spray your water, your spouts. All right. And the middle group here, you guys, we have a bigger group here, so we're going to kind of break you up to right here. So all of you here, and even you guys in the back, don't think you're off the hook. If you're standing in the back, you guys are going to be the Takaya, the wolf. Okay? So let's see the wolf. You got your snout out here and your happy tail. And if you really feel like a Takaya, you can howl. Ow! And the last group from right here, all over here, you guys are going to be the, want to do raven? Yeah. Oh, Scout the raven. So he's a haughty bird. He's saying, I'm the best. I love all shiny things. And he's known as a trickster, so he has his head up in the air. And he's just being like cheeky, right? And we call Scout, he's like he lives amongst our people. He teaches us lots of things about how to be good and behave. And really, he shows us what not to do. He means well, but he's silly. But he's known as that trickster. And so at the beginning, if you guys all want to stand up, this is a full participation. You're going to be the chief in the village. You're going to have your hands on your hip, and you're inviting everyone to come and dance with us, okay? Yeah, you're going to dance with them, each group, okay? Every animal. Okay, so first we got the Spakwas over there. Then we have the Yo-Yos, the killer whale. Then we have the Takaya and the Skouk. That order, okay. Yeah, go over there. Okay, you want to sing with me? Sure, yeah. Okay, great. All right, so, pardon? They'll do the dancing. Okay, yeah, they're great for that. Okay, so we're in the village, and we're all going to be inviting everyone to come dance with us, okay? Yo-ho, yo-ho, hey. Yo-ho, ho, ho, he, yo-ho, hey. Yo-ho, hey. Yo-ho, hey. You guys can clap with me. Yo-ho, ho, yo-ho, hey. Yo-ho, ho, ho, he, yo-ho, hey. Yo-ho, hey. Yo-ho, hey. The Spakwas get up and dance. Hey, yo, ho, ho, he, yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, he, yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, hey. The yo-yos get up and dance. Yo, ho, ho, he, yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, he, yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, hey. The Takaya get up and dance. Yo, ho, he, yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, he, yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, hey. The Skouk, the raven, get up and dance. Yo, ho, he, yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, he, yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, hey. Everybody get up and dance. Yo, ho, he, yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, hey. Yo, ho, hey. can sit down. You guys were all great animals. And this is like a competition. So if I had to give anyone an award, I'd have to give it to the Takayas. They were even howling around, so impressed. But they say when you can mimic an animal, they'd say you're good hunters. So, yeah. So the women were watching. All right. So thank you so much for having us today. We were just really honored to be able to, share just a little bit of who we are. We have way more stuff to talk about on Wednesday, and more important things on MMIW, and really honoring our ancestors that came before us. So we thank you again. Kayachtin.
Thank you, everybody, for letting us share our medicine with you all today. Haichka.
Deanna, that was amazing. Thank you so much. So the fact that everyone was up, standing, dancing, and singing, I think we can all agree that that was amazing. So I would like to give another round of applause for the beating drum of the unborn history. Thank you. I don't even know how to top that, but we will transition very awkwardly to the opening. Thank you guys so much. And they will again Wednesday. Lots more where that is to come on Wednesday. So stay tuned and make sure, you participate on Wednesday in those events. So now we're going to transition to the opening plenary. And so I'd like to welcome Heather Mannix up to the stage. She's the interim co-executive director and director of strategic engagement at Compass, and she'll be introducing the plenary coming up. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Becky. I am very pleased to have the opportunity to introduce the opening panel today. And I want to, before I start, I want to acknowledge that I traveled here from my home in Washington, D.C., which are the ancestral lands of the Nacashtank people and the Piscataway tribes. And as Becky said, I work with Compass. We are a nonprofit organization that supports scientists, researchers, and those with specialized knowledge to collaborate with people outside their field. Through science communication workshops and coaching, we prepare them to effectively share their work and facilitate connections with communities, policymakers, journalists on key issues. And we believe this leads to better access to science, more informed policy, and more nuanced coverage in the media. So we were really thrilled to be able to partner with NACCB to organize this panel discussion on conservation storytelling. And as we work to foster a more equitable, inclusive, and diverse field of conservation practitioners, it's important to build bridges outside of our community. Storytelling, when done ethically, is one of the most powerful ways that we can connect with others and inspire action. And we have a really wonderful panel of journalists and media artists who will explore this topic and help us understand what this looks like in practice. So our moderator for this evening is Leslie Ogden Evans. Leslie is a science journalist based here in the Vancouver area, and Leslie really brings a unique perspective to this panel. Having been a part of the NACCB conferences, both during her years as an academic scientist and then later as a journalist telling stories from the work shared in this community. Drawn to birds after growing up volunteering at a bird banding station with her whole family, Leslie studied the ecology of songbirds and shorebirds during her graduate degrees. After finishing a postdoctoral fellowship here at the UBC Center for Applied Conservation Scientists, she crossed the bridge from scientist to science journalist. And Leslie's work now includes stories for places like the New York Times, BBC, Nature, and CBC's The Nature of Things. So thank you to Leslie and all of our panelists for sharing your insights and experiences with us this evening. I'd also like to gratefully acknowledge my Compass colleagues Bob Crimian and Alex Griffith, who organized this panel. So our hope is that this conversation will set the stage for thoughtful discussion throughout the conference and encourage you all to think about the ways that you tell your own stories. So with that, Leslie.
Thank you.
Storytelling is one of the oldest human art forms. Even before our ancestors had language, they were telling stories in the form of paintings, often of animals, on cave walls. Today, while the media through which we tell stories has vastly expanded, the importance of a powerful story, well told, has arguably never been greater. Stories have the power to shift attitudes, empower underrepresented voices, and transport an audience on a journey beyond their everyday experience. These journeys can increase empathy, trust, and inspire action. Conservation scientists and knowledge holders bear witness to scenes of change and discovery that most people will never experience. Yet the human emotional impact of these experiences is often left out when scientists talk and write about their work. During this panel, we are very fortunate to have the opportunity to learn from these four talented storytellers: Stephanie Quatasawad-Wood, Adian, Daniel Piper, and Kunu Bercham. Our panelists will introduce themselves in just a few moments, and in our discussion, we're going to share with you how storytellers find and develop compelling conservation stories. Our hope is that you'll leave this session motivated to tell your own stories, to bring people to a place of hope and action. Before we get started, I'd just like to take the pulse of our audience in terms of your experience working with storytellers. So if your work has ever been profiled by media, please stand up. Great. Okay, I'd like you to stay standing if you would rate your most recent media interaction as a 10 out of 10 positive experience. Okay, interesting. For those still standing, don't sit down yet, raise your hand if you went into that interview or interaction feeling fully prepared about the story that you wanted to share. Wow, that is incredible. Okay, thank you. You can sit down. So tips for a positive experience in working with media is going to be part of our focus today. To that end, it is my great pleasure and privilege to showcase the work of these four storytellers who create stories across a wide variety of platforms. I'm going to invite each of them to share with you some of the most powerful and impactful stories they've worked on. We'll discuss together the importance of ethical storytelling and building relationships of trust. They're going to give you the story behind the story, and I think you're in for a treat. So without further ado, I invite these four panelists to briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll dive into that rich discussion. Stephanie, we'll start with you. Yeah, I'm going to come.
Hello? Hello? Is that working? It is on? Sorry. I'm hearing impaired. There's my introduction first. Hello, my name is Stephanie, and my ancestral name is Quatasawat, and I'm a member of the Squamish Nation. And I work as a journalist for the Narwhal, which is an online publication that covers the natural world. And it began in BC, and that's the area that I cover, but we also now have bureaus in the prairies and in Ontario. And yeah, it's all online, and it's a small nonprofit organization. And I do a lot of stories that are covering Indigenous rights and anything to do with the natural world here in BC. That's included mining, salmon, all different kinds of topics, and definitely speaking with lots of different kinds of experts, people who are on the ground interacting with the land, and scientists and advocates and people in government, all different types. And I'm really grateful to be here with everyone to talk more about storytelling. So happy to be here.
Is mine on? Yes. First of all, I want to say thank you to the wonderful dancing. I think that was a terrific way to start this, and a wonderful introduction to the evening. My name is Ed Yan. I'm an executive producer at Oregon Public Broadcasting, which is a large media organization in the Northwest, combination PBS and NPR station, for those of you who know. And I've spent my career with folks like you, 25 years in Oregon, doing stories of archaeology, invasive species. I've done wolves and cougars and wolverines, and my favorite, the Siuslaw hairy-necked tiger beetle. We did a podcast a few years ago called The Timber Wars, which captures the Timber Wars experience in the Northwest. A national PBS series on archaeology called Time Team America. Been in glacier caves and in swamps and doing all the wonderful things that you guys do. I always wanted to be a biologist, a predator ecologist actually, and that's too hard. So I get to do all the fun stuff. You know, you spend years getting grants and doing all the research. I get to show up at the fun part, you know, when you capture the wolves or doing your study. And I think science storytelling is the best kind of storytelling. There are so many interesting stories to tell, and I love coming to events like this to share a little bit about what it is like from our end, but I'm always in awe of the work that you all do.
Hi everyone, my name is Danielle Piper. I work as an associate producer at CBC Radio-Canada. I mostly work with a little show called What on Earth that works on reporting and stories on climate solutions. So basically anyone who's working in the field of climate and how they are working towards a better planet with less emissions. I'm also a freelance journalist, so I work with a number of other organizations, but I am also the 2021-2022 Canadian Journalism Foundation Black Women's Journalism Fellow, and that was the first fellowship of its kind at CBC.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kunu Bercham. I am Ho-Chunk Nation and German on my mother's side and Northern Cheyenne on my father's side. Originally from Eugene, Oregon, New Mexico as well. And most recently, I've been working as a freelance video producer for Oregon Public Broadcasting with Ed. Ed brought me on last summer. And other than that, I'm a storyteller, a multimedia producer, an artist. I make music, and as an Indigenous person and a media producer, I feel like I have a mission to raise the profile of Indigenous people, our stories, and just our everyday experiences, and bringing our existence into the now, and letting the dominant culture know that we are still here, and we have stories to tell.
Thank you. So I think we're in for a really amazing panel here. What I'd like to start with is asking each of you, there are many different types of storytelling. I'd like each of you to share with us a favorite story that you've worked on and why you think it worked so well. So Danielle, we'll start with you.
Wow, me, okay. So my favorite story, I would say, so I'm originally from the Caribbean. My immediate and extended family are all from the Caribbean or Latin America. So I do tend to gravitate towards stories like that are in those countries. My favorite story comes out of, it starts in Canada, but it ends in Nicaragua. Basically, there were a group of Canadians who are helping build what they call smoke-free stoves in little communities in Nicaragua. Now, they're not really smoke-free because a stove can never really be smoke-free if they're using non-renewable resources. However, the stoves that they were using caused a lot of health issues. It was producing a lot of emissions, but it was also causing a lot of health issues. And what we were seeing were children who had frequent asthma attacks. They were having breathing issues, respiratory issues, same with the women, and they were mostly the ones in the kitchen being affected. So we saw, this story was about a group of Canadians who, instead of going in with a savior complex and bulldozing and telling them what to do, worked with another nonprofit organization that was helping building stoves in multiple countries throughout the world, but had this specific stove that was created by another Latin American woman. And they helped them, they partnered with them to go into the community, teach everyone how to build these stoves, create their own little microeconomy in terms of like collecting money so they could maintain these stoves. And then they left them to do it all themselves, making them incredibly self-sufficient in terms of building their own stoves and doing it for other people. And that's my favorite story.
Thanks, Danielle. And that story would be available on What on Earth if people wanted to download the podcast,
so
right?
if you go to CBC What on Earth, our webpage will have it there. You can go into segments. So we have full episodes and then we have segments. It's about a year old, so there's a bit of a scroll, but you can find it there.
Great, thank you. Stephanie, I'd like to hear from you. Tell us about a favorite story that you've worked on.
Yeah, one of my favorites is a story about the Mamalela First Nation, which is the traditional territories at the tip of Vancouver Island and encompassing some of the islands up there. And they declared an Indigenous protected and conserved area, and they declared it unilaterally under their own authority without waiting for the permission or just for BC or Canada to hop on board. And they first put out a press release, and it didn't get a whole lot of attention because that was the time that BC experienced its catastrophic floods. And so the story just kind of went without much notice. And part of the reason I really like is it just shows how much you don't like it. It just undermines the idea that a story like misses its moment to be in the news, because we kept talking afterwards, and eventually they created this community event to bring people to a village site where people hadn't lived in about 100 years, and many of them had never been there. Many had never been to the area of the new IPCA at all because they hadn't been allocated any reserves in their traditional villages. Many had never set foot there. So they wound up inviting just a few of us journalists to go with them to a community event out there, and we got to have the incredible privilege to be with everyone when they got to set foot on this land for the first time and see it for the first time. And it was an incredibly rainy, stormy day, and yet everyone was so happy. And it was such a beautiful thing to experience. And it was beyond, the press release moment. It was like, here's what it really means to come home, to return to the land and to declare a protected area. Here's what they're trying to protect. And there was just so much heart in everyone that was there. It was a really beautiful story. We illustrated all of the plans of what they were putting in place to protect this area, and it actually wound up winning an award for stories on climate solutions. So it displayed the full depth of what the solution could really be and what these people's vision was.
Congrats on your award. That sounds like a great story.
Thank you.
Ed, sorry. Ed, what about you? Tell us about a favorite story that you've worked on.
Yeah, this is actually kind of an easy question. I've been really lucky. I got to travel a lot and see a lot of things, and I usually tell people one of the most interesting experiences was I got to camp in the crater of Mount St. Helens to explore these glacier caves that had never been explored before. But when I thought about it, particularly for this group, one of the most interesting stories I ever got to tell was about lichen. How many of you guys are just like between like Game of Thrones marathons and like Real Housewives? You're like, I really wish I had a story about lichen. Okay, couple. Thank you. This is my crowd. So as a TV producer, I was like, I love the small things. I love the small wonders of ecology in the world. And I was like, this is the ultimate challenge. Can I do a TV story about this green crust on trees? Could it be interesting? And you can check it out for yourself. I actually had my crew put it back online on YouTube. It's called What Lichen Can Tell Us About Air Quality in the Northwest. And it was so great because of the scientists that we were working with had such exuberance and life and was joy. And we're going up in this canopy crane in this old growth forest in Washington, and they're like, look at the Candelaria lichen and the, I don't even know, Glaucus macia, I don't know. I'm not a scientist. And they're showing me all these things. I'm like, and you hear me on camera go, you're talking about these things like they're so beautiful. And they're like, they're so beautiful. And you're immediately in, because these people were so good. And the trick of the story was that then you realize not only are they wonderful and beautiful and can speak to our world and what we have in it, but they can tell us something about air quality and the changing air quality in the Columbia River Gorge in Portland. And they show us, like, here's one from Portland, and here's the same exact lichen from the old growth, and they look completely different. And it's, what a trick, right? Nobody's tuning in to see a story about lichen, but they did in volumes. Like, we just put it up a couple days. It's a 10-year-old story, and it's getting another audience. There's something about, if you can tell a story that creates a sense of wonder, people are in. And that's why I come to things like this, because it doesn't work without you. So that's why I wanted to share that one.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, there's nothing like bringing passion to a story. That is really gold for a storyteller. Kunu, I know that you have a special story to share and actually perform with us.
Yeah. So I'm a musician. I'm a performing artist as well, and I want to honor up the space here. And I wanted to give thanks to Deanna Lewis and her family, and also to the Musqueam, Suquamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people for just being here as a visitor. So I'm going to do this in two parts. I'm going to try to share a quick story about one of the video productions I worked on several years ago in the Klamath Lakes area in Oregon. And to me, it's really important because right now, Oregon Public Broadcasting and a program called Oregon Field Guide is doing a story on the dams coming down along the Klamath River. And it's really amazing because for the most part, the water now is basically running in its natural state from the river to the ocean in a way that it hasn't done in more than 100 years. And so, definitely for the indigenous people, for the tribes along the river who've lived there their whole entire life, this is a big deal. There's a lot of happy people on the tribal side of things. I also want to acknowledge that there are agricultural interests and farmers who are also involved in this story, and they aren't so happy. They're seeing that their way of life for the last 100 years is changing now. So I want to acknowledge their side of the story as well. And we're all humans in this, and we're trying to work together. So with that, the story that I'm trying to tell you is from a documentary I did about 6 years ago about the Oregon tribes through a nonprofit called Wisdom of the Elders. And I interviewed a Klamath tribal person, and we were at the headwaters of the Klamath River. His name is Derek Kimball, and he was telling me this story, and this was about 6 years ago. So there was news that potentially the dams were going to come down at some point pretty soon, and so we didn't know when, but we were at the headwaters of the Klamath River, and he brought me to this place where the water just comes out of the earth, right? It's like that's where it's at, and it's like the most pure water right there. And we were there, and he was telling me, he was like, you see this forest that's around us, this beautiful forest? These trees look strong and they look healthy, but they're actually malnourished trees. This is a malnourished forest. And this forest hasn't received, a 1,000,000+ pound dump of salmon food, right? Nutrition from these salmon bodies. This forest hasn't been fed that in over 100 years. And he was saying, hopefully in my lifetime, we'll be able to see these salmon come back and then feed this forest again. And so to me, that was just such an amazing just visual in my mind to think like, wow, like I wonder what this forest would have looked like, when it was getting all of these nutrients from this, this cycle of life of the salmon, forever, right? That's what it was used to. And so hopefully in our lifetime, we'll be able to see that again. So that was a visual. And then also just acknowledging, all of the science that goes around it. But as a storyteller, I just wanted to share that visual with you, and I hope you can see that in your mind with me. And that's part of the work that we do as media producers and storytellers. And before I finish my time, I'm going to share a little bit of a hand drum, some of my culture, a little bit of a song with y'all. I think I'll do it over here on this mic. Spirit of crazy horse, a supernatural force. I'll bring the sounds of the burial ground all across the nations to all the different races. And one thing's the same, oppression it remains for the almighty dollar. Fathers will sell daughters and brothers will kill brothers. So it seems cash is king. Cha-ching, I guess I'm hunting royalty. Watch me catch my royalties, the spoils of these wars and these tours across the land. I do it for my fam, and I do it for my clan. I do it for creation. All my relations said, way, yeah, way, yeah, yeah, Yahweh, yeah, yeah, Yahweh, Yahweh, yo, hey, yeah, hey, yo, way. To the tomb and a cradle to the grave. I'll never be a slave, so what follow the moon and the North Star? Yes, I'm guided by the heavens and I'm running from the devils, leading a band of rebels through all the levels of hell just to ring the bells. I'm calling out the 4 horsemen of apocalypse. I'm trying to stop this, but politicians are endorsing world wars and global warming. So what can you do? Well, you can join the crew, but only if your soul is true to the path of a revolutionary warrior. Said, way, Yahweh, 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 yo, hey, Yahweh, yo. Thank you.
Kunu, thank you so much. Great. So I would like to talk now about, or get the panelists to talk about the story behind a great story. So Danielle, how do you know when you found a story worth telling?
Yeah, I know that I found a great story when it either makes me go aha or mm-hmm. So I like to call them aha or mm-hmm moments. Aha is like when you wouldn't possibly think of that moment, that story, that fact. Like, it's such a surprise. Everyone's going to be enlightened by that one thing. If it makes you go aha, then it's probably a really good story. Mm-hmm is more when you relate to something someone is saying. So if they're talking about their home life and it reminds you of another story you've heard or even something from your own life and you go, it's usually something that you know is probably universally relatable for a lot of other people. And they're probably going to want to hear that story as well.
Great, thank you. I love the aha and Ed, what are the elements that make a good story, a great story?
Good people. That's where it starts. There's a couple things that we look for, particularly in the visual storytelling. So I do radio, I do television, I do doc, I do the whole thing. But I think most often visually first. And there's a couple like guiding principles. You have to have somebody going somewhere, doing something for a reason. And why that's important for you all, oftentimes we get these really excited scientists like, I finished my work, here it is, these are the results, and you're like, well, that's great, but we missed the best part. We can't do a story about that at the end. You know, you want to be along on the journey. And so good story is a journey. And a good story has a start, a middle, and an end. A good story has unanswered questions at the beginning. And a really good, I think, ethical journalism story doesn't try to sew it all up for you at the end. It doesn't try to give you the answers. It makes you think deeper about something. And so, you know, I've done some amazing stories that it's the power of the person who's like, come along with me. And we're going to go check out, I was just thinking of a recent story we did in Japan on, it was a engineering story about a building built on these pogo sticks for earthquake preparedness. But it was like, you get to go into this building and go down in the basement and see these things and how it works. And, you know, through that, you're like, and then you start thinking, like, well, could this be done in my city? And why aren't we doing this? But every story, every good story is a journey. It's not a recitation of facts. Take me somewhere, and then take people with you.
Thank you. That's an amazing tip there. Stephanie, in doing your reporting, what can science experts do to help you share their work?
Yeah, well, first I have to say, Kudu, you have an incredibly beautiful voice. I just have to acknowledge that out loud. And that kind of is connected, that we may not be as musically talented as Kunu or Deanna, but what we really feel in that moment is the heart and the vulnerability, right? And that is something that we can all emulate and that we all have. And so that's the main thing to bring to any story that you're doing. When I was doing that Mama Layla class story, like, it was so driven forward by the chief of that community, where this had been his passion project. He had been pushing for this to happen for years before he was even in office. It was like everything he wanted was to make that happen for his people, and he was able to so vulnerably share that. And we can just always tell when someone's being authentic with us. It doesn't mean having to be more flashy or more pithy or overthinking what you normally would say. It's just like, how can you show up in the most authentic way possible? Like, people can just feel when you do that, right? And in a more like technical way that goes hand in hand with that, kind of like what we were just talking about, a bit more time kind of helps you do that, and the journalist as well. So if you kind of are sending a study or a press release at the last minute and it's like, oh, it's going to come out tomorrow, it's a lot harder to accomplish that depth. And it's hard because everyone's busy and it's hard to make that time. But the more you can kind of fit that time in and build the relationship earlier, bring people along, have conversations till you feel more comfortable with the journalist, it kind of lets you get to that point of depth and vulnerability and lets that narrative come out.
Thank you. Yeah, authenticity and giving journalists lots of lead time, that's really very helpful. Kunu, what are your thoughts on how science experts can help you with impactful storytelling?
You know, so yesterday we were in this group, and we were talking with a group of scientists about this very question, and how we can help to relay the information to the general public, and then the idea is to have people act on that information. And so I think for the most part, journalists and filmmakers and storytellers we're just very interested. We are the layman, and we're think of us as kind of the vehicle to get your information out to the people. For the most part, of course there is that small percentage of media out there that maybe doesn't like the information that you're presenting or trying to present to the world. So we have to acknowledge that. But for the most part, I think we're just humans. We're just other people with a different set of skills trying to get the same work done. And so for me, I was just, one thing that I was trying to relay yesterday was thinking about all of the stories, all of these science stories that I've heard over the years, and the ones that I can remember. I'm sorry, I don't have one right off the top of my head, but if it was told on the radio, or I guess it would be mostly the radio, is there's just something visual like in my head that connects me to that story. Like it may have been a 10-minute long, story about climate change and all of these nasty facts about hundreds of millions of parts of particles per whatever, but what really stuck with me was something visual, and then a personal story, somebody somewhere experiencing the effects of this data that is being presented. So just that's if that can help at all, is as you're presenting your information to journalists or to the general public, I think just to always remember to connect that information to a human experience, and that will seal the deal with getting that information to the person, and they'll remember that.
Thanks, Kunu. So with respect to ethics and storytelling, Stephanie, what would you highlight in terms of some of the differences between storytelling from a Western science versus Indigenous perspective?
Yeah, this is something that comes up a ton, and I felt like I have a really good anecdote that really summarizes it. We were doing a story about caribou conservation and decline of caribou in the province. And a scientist I was speaking to about a report shared this story with me, and it wound up kind of being the basis of this article that we wrote. And he was saying, the West Moberly and Soto First Nations put a lot of work into building these maternal pens to protect mothers and their babies or calves of this endangered caribou herd. And that it's been really effective, and they had about 38 caribou left, and in like a decade they brought it up to 138, which is objectively an incredible feat that everyone's really proud of, and it was First Nations led. But the scientist said, we were kind of like patting ourselves on the back a little bit, being like, this is great, which it is. But then Chief Rowland of West Moberly said, well, sure, we got to 138, but we're nowhere near ever being able to feed our elders caribou again. And so they wound up doing an entire study about, okay, how strong would the population have to be for them to ever be able to rely on this essential food source again? And they found that the herd would have to be at least 3,000 strong just to get some meals out to every family. I think it was like not more than a dozen. Don't quote me, you can find the study, but a handful of meals for every family in West Moberly and Soto. That just put it in perspective, right? And the way that Chief Rowland talked about it was, he said, we're managing, when we talk about conservation, we're often just basically meaning not extinction. And so he really put it in perspective how we address data, how we address success. And there's totally different contexts. And so we're often trying to center Indigenous knowledge in a way that it's not like an add-on or something that needs to be validated by Western science, that it's something that has that is a standalone on its own. And if Western science aligns with it, that's alignment, but it's not validating. Another really quick example was there was a big study, it was a while ago now, a big article, a big story that came out saying how these researchers had discovered this village on the coast of BC. And I was chatting about that with one of the community members who was like, we always knew that was there. What are they talking about? We know that, we go there. What? I was just so upset with how it had been portrayed. And so it's often just these implicit assumptions that sneak in, even if you're not really meaning to do it with the language that we use day to day.
Thank you for sharing that. Kunu, how about you? What would you highlight in terms of some of the differences between storytelling from Western science versus Indigenous perspectives?
I don't know. Like that was a perfect example. I don't know how to follow up on that, other than, you know, just one thing that I want to highlight, and it's a little tricky, especially because of the audience here. Like, not I don't want to belittle any of the time and effort and energy you all have put into your fields, but when I go out and interview certain culture keepers and indigenous people who, you know, maybe they didn't get the chance to go to a university and learn in these Western science fields, they have, you know, very I mean, their knowledge is you know, just as valid, and they've been on the land, you know, understanding, you know, systems for their entire life, and it's a little upsetting sometimes to then see the kind of the clash between these people who have like very valid information that is now then just being like acknowledged by, you know, the greater science community, like, oh yeah, that thing that we've always said, right? Okay, cool. You know, and then it's like that, but then the unfortunate thing is, like, having all that information, it doesn't translate to like making a living and, you know, and having a salary and a career. So there's a disconnect there, and I would hope that sometime in the future that type of, you know, culture bearing knowledge can be respected and then also compensated at some point, you know. And so that's just what I want to add to that.
Thank you. Ed, how do you reflect on how you make sure that you're doing fair, true, non-extractive storytelling?
I've been thinking about this for the last couple minutes as you guys have been sharing, and I'm going to offer up a pretty hard story to start. I am not indigenous. I have done a lot of indigenous not storytelling, but, you know, telling stories from indigenous communities. And I worked for a show called Time Team America. It was a PBS series around the country. And this is honestly one of the worst producing stories I can tell. Actually, Kuno, I don't think I've even talked about it with you. So the story was about archaeology on the Zuni Nation. And the tribe wanted PBS to come there and do this story. And it was on me as the producer to kind of figure out the story, do the logistics. This is a National Science Foundation project, lots of money, big crew of like 35 people. We would travel around to do these stories. But, you know, schedules and budget and pressure and timelines and all these things that are, in my world, normal. We're trying to get an archaeology story done there, and the timelines are very different. And it took multiple visits with the tribal council and speaking with them and kind of coming to an understanding. And I'm in this space of like wanting to do the best possible job I can, but these schedules and the budget and everything are just ticking. And I wonder how many of those people who had bad experience with journalism, where it comes from this. Our needs were great, and we could not see eye to eye on this and how we were going to pull this off in the time frame it needed to happen for television. So this story did not happen. It bailed. We went to a different story. I don't think it could have happened any other way, but what it taught me was something about, like, this is all about our needs from a television perspective. Our needs to get a story done. Our needs to take a story and get it on air. And so several years ago, I was at a Society of Environmental Journalists conference, and a native indigenous panel was talking about indigenous storytelling for non-indigenous journalists. And it was really powerful, and they talked about extractive journalism. And I was like, this is it. This is exactly what, and the position I was in, by the nature of my job and who I am. That extractive storytelling where if I'm going to interview someone from city council, that's expected. That's kind of part of Western culture. It's like, I come to you, you give me information, I print it, whatever. That's the deal. It's got to be different when you're dealing with sovereign nations and stories that do not owe us being the media. They don't have to share these stories. They don't owe us anything to tell these stories. So the approach has to be different. And non-extractive storytelling is really about rethinking and reframing how you go about something. So in working with Kunu on the Klamath tribal story, it was like about giving my reporter who's doing the main work on this time. Like, look, I'm just gonna free up. Take as many trips down there as you can. Sometimes you're not gonna come back with anything. That's okay. Let them know who you are. Let them see if they, share of yourself, be comfortable. Let's see if they're comfortable with you. And if they're not, it's not going forward. And if they are, great, we have a relationship. Sharing back what the story is and how we're approaching it more deeply than you would with a city council member. It requires a real change of thinking. I'm speaking from my perspective as a non-Indigenous storyteller, like the expectations have to be different or the outcome will always be bad. So I'm sorry if I just kind of went off. I was not actually planning to share that initial story, but I think it's informative of how I've been thinking about that.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. The timelines not being in alignment, that's a huge issue. Danielle, you've done a lot of international reporting. Can you reflect a little bit on how you can do non-extractive storytelling when you're doing stories that are international?
Yeah, so often when you hear international stories, sometimes you're not hearing from the people themselves. You're hearing other people tell their stories. So specifically when I'm doing a story on Nicaragua or Tuvalu or Vanuatu or any country in the Caribbean, no matter where the story comes from, sure, I'm going to do a little background chat, a little pre-interview with you, get the context. But the last question I'm always going to ask you is, okay, who on the ground can I speak to? Who is there? Who can really confirm what it is that you're talking about? And I want to hear how they have either been impacted or benefited from whatever it is you're telling me, whether it's your research, whether it's your climate solution that you think is oh so great. I want to hear it from their mouths. And I also want to hear that you didn't just come in and tell them what to do and how to do it. I want to know that there was collaboration, there was listening, there was understanding, and then there was a mutual agreement on how to move forward. And yeah, I think that's the best way in terms of international reporting. I will say I have no shame, so I will go into people's DMs on LinkedIn and be like, hi, Minister of whoever, I really want to talk to you about XYZ. I've done it multiple times before on different platforms, but I'm definitely getting that local voice, that person who I can speak to. And if they speak a different language, I'm definitely going to find a translator somewhere in our organization or someone who can translate for me so I can hear their story.
Thank you for sharing that. That's great. And I think this is a good place to acknowledge that some stories are threatening to those in positions of power. So, and globally, many storytellers have lost their lives in the course of bringing important environmental issues to light. Even in Canada, in places like Fairy Creek and Wet'suwet'en territory here in BC, journalists have been intimidated, threatened, detained, and jailed just for doing their job. I have enormous gratitude and respect for these storytellers working often at great personal risk to bring these important stories to light. As scientists and knowledge holders, it also takes courage to work with the media. And understandably, it can be difficult to trust the media, given that it's such a broad spectrum of what that means. So finding journalists and storytellers that you trust is really key. So I'd like to delve into that now. Ed, starting with you, how can scientists build trust with journalists in the process of telling a story?
One of the first tips I always give folks when they're asking about talking to the media is do your research on the reporter. Google is right at your fingertips. Figure out who you're talking to and whether you even want to start talking to them. That's the first place, because there's some bad actors in journalism, right? Not sharing any secret there. But in terms of like a relationship with us, it's funny how there's a kind of a wall sometimes with people don't know how to approach the media. They don't know how to reach out and say, I got a story to tell, or to learn whether we'd be interested in their story. We are an email away, always, and we're always checking, like, what's coming in, who do we know? And the best relationships have been those scientists who just share things, check in, hey, did you know this is happening? Thank you, I didn't. It's not always about themselves, it's about someone else's work, and they become part of a network of connections. 80% of what you can do that is of value to science and the public in your spaces is actually just being a point of connection for journalists. It's not about getting your photo or your image on the screen. It's like, can you help get things right by people like us that we don't, we rely on smart folks like you that we can reach out to and we have a comfort with because we've established this over time. Like, hey, can I call you? Like, I'm doing this story. It's a little bit out of my zone. It's about physics, and I really can't stand physics, but I have to do this story. But I know you know something about it. And being available to talk, being available to chat, and being open for dumb questions. Because journalists have a lot of dumb questions, and they need people to ask them those questions to get them answered. So it is a relationship business. This is all about being human. It's all about our connections with each other. For my job, I try to be pretty open and not put up a wall and just talk to anybody. And I hope that you would all feel the same, like freedom to reach out. I got a story that you might be interested in. Please reach out and share it.
That's great, thank you. And I mean, that's something really that in my work also, I would emphasize is that journalists reaching out directly as opposed to necessarily sending a press release. You are free at any time to reach out to journalists. Whether we respond or not depends on how overflowing our email inbox is, but please do reach out. We love hearing from scientists about your work.
Can I make an enemy here? When I teach science communication at university, I always say, do not be trained by your comms department. Do not get trained by a PR person. And you're gonna all hate me, and I'm sure there's some out there. But here's the reason. Oftentimes PR folks, they tell you what they want you to tell about your organization. They're not thinking, what does the audience need to know? What is the value to the public in what you have to share? They're thinking like, make sure you talk about the partnerships and the collaborations and all this stuff, which honestly, that's not, when I'm reading the paper, that's not the first thing I'm interested in. I do care about your work. So yeah, sorry, cut out the comms people and then hate me later.
Thanks, Ed, that's a useful tip. Great, so Kunu, I'm wondering if you can reflect a little bit now on working in high conflict scenarios, particularly when there's a lack of trust in media.
Yeah, so I want to go back to this story about the Klamath River and the undamming of the rivers, and so I was attached to this journalist, Cassandra Profita, who's doing amazing work around the story and getting different sides and different angles from the parties who are being affected by these dams coming down. And myself as a Native person, an Indigenous person, I just feel like if I'm involved in certain shoots, potentially I may not get, me being there may be the reason that the story gets, there isn't maybe a more honest interaction with a journalist, because right now it's a very high conflict situation, and I think me being a media person, I'm also like really mad at the media because for so long this issue is being painted as black and white. People are using terms as like water wars, and even though there is very real conflicts and very real history of divisiveness in the communities among the tribal people and the farming interests and the cattle interests in the area. That being said, so for me being someone trying to find a story and an honest story, I feel like in some spaces I may have to remove myself because I may be seen as this radical Indian that is trying to do this thing, and to me, honestly, as a filmmaker being attached to a journalist, I try to take that mask off when I go and do that work and really do the work of supporting journalism and trying to get an honest story out to the public. So that's just something that I'm coming across based on my identity and identity politics and culture wars, and we have this crazy election coming up in the States. So there's a lot of just kind of tension in the air, especially around topics in the environment. And so I don't know if I answered that per se, but I'm just saying, it's a little tricky for me trying to be a journalist in these spaces.
Thanks, Kunu. Danielle, I'm wondering if you can drill a little bit more into how you source and center local voices when you're reporting internationally. Can you give us a little more on that?
In terms of how I find them?
Yeah, how you find them and how you go about working with them. I know when we spoke earlier, you talked about how you establish contact with people there and build trust. And can you drill into that a little bit more?
Yeah, so sometimes stories come through someone just emailing me in my inbox and oftentimes it's because they've heard a previous segment that reminded them of something that they're currently doing. So that's one of the best ways that I love getting a story, because you've already reached out to me. But in terms of reaching out to other people, it is really just a deep rabbit hole on Google. I'm not even gonna lie. It's going into Google and finding who are the people talking about this. It's going on YouTube and finding who's been in the media in that country and who's on the ground. A lot of the time, it's even searching through Twitter and social media platform history and just typing in a bunch of keywords and seeing who's talking about this and why does that matter to that person. Are they from that place? Do they have family that used to live there? Did they move because of something that happened? That's where you're gonna find the real nitty-gritty stories of people who are really affected by climate change and why they want solutions out there.
Great, thank you. And Stephanie, can you share with us an example of how a relationship of trust birthed an incredible story?
Yeah, there's a really great example that happened recently where it started with just a conversation with that scientist I mentioned earlier, and we were just talking about that report. And so that's a kind of a good way to start. If you start with something simple that maybe is like a bit more direct, less controversial or sensitive, and you can kind of test how things go with the journalist, and like before you go on to something bigger that might be a little bit more difficult. And then he connected me with another biologist and another community. And then so I got to write a really awesome story about bighorn sheep. And then I was speaking to this other biologist about his work on moose. And then he got all excited and was like, you should come to Lake Babine territory and do a story on moose, and we can bring you on a moose hunt. And then I got to go up to Lake Babine territory and go on a moose hunt, which was incredible, absolutely incredible for me. I was so lucky. And then we did a story that was, once again, it's like a person on the land doing the hunting, even though the story is about moose population, and there's lots of like links to science in there, but it's a person on the land, and it's what's at stake, what matters. And then they also connected us with doing a story about their salmon camps, and once again, that story was based in people, their camps, and passing on that knowledge. And there was all these beautiful photos of people working together and smiling and being happy, and at the same time, the story has all the very real consequences of salmon decline. And all of that came from that initial call with that one scientist about that one little report. But every time that we kept connecting with each other and staying in touch longer and longer, that was like a year ago, I first got in touch with them, and we're still talking about other story ideas that we could do. So it's just like the ideal example of what happens. It just connects you. You can start with someone who maybe is a bit more secure with media, but then after you have a better relationship, connect them with community members who may otherwise not get the opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah, it can be amazing how establishing that trust with that one person leads to further connections, and it just grows from there. Thank you. So I'd like to get each of you to share some tips of the trade for storytelling. Kunu, what challenges have you encountered in trying to produce environment-related stories, and how would you, what tips would you give the audience in terms of working with media?
So for me, one thing that it was kind of my crash course in working with tribal governments, as a tribal person, coming from Indian country, from tribal communities, I just never had that relationship where like I had to go and ask permission from the tribal government to come and do a story about say the chwam, which is the sucker fish of the Klamath Lake, and there's a crazy story about that, and it's kind of sad. I don't want to go into it. I mean, we all have heard these sad stories about native populations of life ceasing to exist. So I'll just move past that and talk about working with the tribal government and asking permission from the tribal council. And so this goes back to kind of Ed's story of timelines, and as a producer, you think generally, you have this timeline that you've set, and you want this subject or this group of people or this organization to work with the timeline that you've set. But what I noticed with working with different tribal organizations or tribal governments, is that we had to think like 6 to 8 weeks out before we would even be able to like have a green light to go into the community and do our work as filmmakers, because maybe the tribe is shut down, because maybe there was a prominent figure that passed away. That happens, and so then total tribal governments will be totally blocked off, and they go through their ceremonies, and then they come back and are available to the general public. So for me, just specifically, I wanted to connect that with this environmental science work and traditional ecological knowledge work, and the intersection of those things in the last few years has been really awesome. And I think that maybe for people working here in the sciences and working with tribal communities, if you haven't done that yet, that's something to know, that you are working with a sovereign government and and a sovereign people, and so there are going to be these different, you're knocking on the door of another country, so it's like you can't just expect to go in there and say, hey, I want to do this research, and this is my timeline, so you have there are certain protocols. So just I've heard people in my work being frustrated and not understanding that. And so if you haven't done that work yet with a tribal community, just to think about that in advance, that it definitely will take longer than you think it will.
Thank you. And Stephanie, for your part, what are some challenges that you've encountered in producing conservation and environment-related stories?
Yeah, what I noticed when we were having our workshop yesterday was that actually some of the challenges really align with the same challenges that the participants were experiencing. It can be hard to find a way to simplify it for a way that people understand without oversimplifying or misportraying information. And it can be hard if you are doing one of those quick news stories to do it right, contact everyone, do all the fact checking. Like that's what we have to do. That's our responsibility. We also get a bit lost in the weeds sometimes, just like our participants were saying they do. Like you can't see the forest for the trees, you get all in these little details, and like sometimes we can't find the story either. we're also struggling. So I feel like a lot of those problems are kind of mirrored, and then the issue of combating misinformation, like we haven't figured out the solution to that. Our stories debunking misinformation don't do as well as misinformation spreads, and we have not figured out the solution. And so there's just the same stuff that the scientists that we were talking to were worrying about as well. And also the question I always get, like, how can we make people care? It's like, that's what we're always trying to figure out too. And that's what we're trying to do whenever we do try to put stuff as a story, as a narrative, and we try to frame stuff as like a human experience, right, that people can relate to. Like that's always what we're trying to get at. And sometimes we really succeed, and sometimes you do an incredible story that hardly gets looked at, so there's still no formula. So yeah, I noticed that a lot of our concerns are actually really, really aligned.
Great. Danielle, what about you? What challenges have you encountered in your storytelling?
I think the biggest challenge sometimes, especially with science, is, we get people pitching us just straight research or straight facts, which is great, but sometimes we need a little bit more. We often refer to it as like the heartbeat of the story. And when we talk about the heartbeat, a lot of journalists will say something like, why should I care? I don't particularly like that question because it sounds a bit flippant and a little bit mean. So I like to say, why do you care? Why are you motivated? Why are you inspired to do this research and to do this work and to help these people? What happened when you were a youth, where you were an adolescent in your adulthood that made you passionate about this specific project or story? And tell me about it, because I want to know. I don't want to just hear the facts. I mean, everyone can read facts, everyone can go on Google, but I do want to hear why you think it's worth telling. And I know you know the answer to that question, because if you didn't, you wouldn't be doing the research.
Great, thank you. So, Ed, what key tip would you give to scientists wanting to build trust and the opportunity for amazing storytelling when working with media?
I think as scientists, a lot of you carry a little bird on your shoulder, and that is your peers. And when you're talking to the media, you're more worried about the little bird on your shoulder than you are about the audience that could really learn something from what your gifts, really. And so I had this story. One of the reasons I got into science communication was a singular moment I had on a fire recovery story in Oregon, rambling down the road with this guy, a scientist, such a brilliant thinker, and we're having normal people conversations and explaining what's going on, and we get to the site that we were going to do this scene and talk about this thing, and what needed to happen is he just needed to acknowledge he's in a clear cut so we can then talk about the deeper thing. And he gave me he's like, we're standing in a multi-generational blah, blah, blah. I'm like, and literally on the tape you hear me go, whoa, what are you doing? He just spent 2 minutes trying to describe and not use the word clear cut because he's worried about the little birdie on his shoulder. I was like, say clear cut because that's not even what this is about. Say it and move on. So getting folks to let your guard down enough to go the media is the person you sidle up to in the bar, and in conversation, you inspire to be interested in your work. Suddenly the light goes on. They're like, whoa, that is fascinating. That's what you want to have in your mind, not your peers. And you're not going to get tested at the end of it, Hopefully you have just an audience that's like, wow, I get it now.
Great, thanks. Stephanie, what about you? Building trust with scientists, what would you say on that?
I think that right at the start, kind of like some of the things we've brought up so far, we're there to be held accountable to the public, and that includes you. And we're not a regulated industry, but we are beholden to a lot of ethics that you are in the power to hold us accountable for. So when you're first connecting with a journalist, you can put them on the spot to do the work for you. Sure, maybe you can research them, but you're busy people. You can also make us do the work, right? And be like, when have you covered this issue before? Did you encounter any issues when you did? Do you foresee any issues this time? How long do you have? What does your fact-checking process look like? Are you going to do a fact-checking call with me or not? All of these questions you can ask, and you don't have to take all the time. You can make us put in the time, because that's what we're supposed to do. And just remember that we are supposed to be accountable to you and everybody else. And then our work is supposed to be in the public interest. And so if you remember that if you do feel like you might be being run over by a journalist who is more extractive, you can have that language as well, to talk to them and be like, how is this framing in the public interest? You can have that, you can have those tools, and it's you can't ultimately control the story that any journalist is going to do, because they are the storyteller in the end, and it may not be exactly what you pictured, but you do have agency in the process of working with them, and you do have agency in the interview process. You can say that you only want to speak on background first, and if they don't agree, then you're like, okay, then see ya. And you have the agency in all of those steps. And whenever it feels scary, literally just take a breath. Don't feel the pressure, because journalists often do have that pressure, that urgency, because that's external for them. They have their deadline and their editor, and so it can be really contagious, and you just take a breath and remember to protect like your time, right? And if it is someone who's willing to do that with you, that's someone that you want to work with, or you just know, hey, this isn't going to work out.
Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, scientists at any time, if you're contacted by a journalist and you're doing an interview, you always have the opportunity to say no or just make it clear that you're not the expert on that particular question and defer it to someone else, or just say, I'm not an expert on that. That really helps us in our process as well. Great. So I would like to get each of the panelists to close with their best 30-second elevator pitch of why conservation scientists and practitioners should share their stories with media. Kunu, let's start with you.
God, I thought I was going to be last. All right. So for me, growing up as a kid, you know, like I wanted to be so many things. A scientist was one of them, and I just love learning. I'm a lifelong learner, and I think subconsciously I ended up becoming a media person, a filmmaker, someone who interviews people, so I could try to like hack my way to the information without doing the work. So just for me, as someone who is super interested in all of the science work that you all are doing, I think all kids are like, we all, the child in us is a scientist, is an artist, is all these things. And so just think about that, when like we are, at least I am, on your team. I'm trying to learn and get the information out to the people.
Great, thanks. Danielle, how about you?
Okay, 30 seconds. We are one planet, one world. We only have one set of oceans. We only have one land. When it's gone, and we will have nothing left. If you are a scientist working on climate solutions, you not only help us, the media, put that message out there, but you help everyone else who is affected by climate change and wants to see change. Was that 30 seconds?
That was great. Close enough.
Okay, great.
Ed.
I am a dad, and the world is on fire. And those two things fight in my head every single day. Because I want to give my kids some sense. Oh my God, I'm actually getting emotional. I actually want to give them some sense that some of this stuff is fixable. And there are people out there doing the good work to make things right. And when I look for solutions, I look to science. I want my kids to understand that science is a process of understanding and making things better so that we're not all just hopeless. I really think this is one area we can look to for a sense of hope.
Thank you. Stephanie.
I'm thinking of just how safe and lucky we are to even just be in this room and be able to openly talk about climate change, science, journalism, and hold power to account in this conversation in the open and feel safe doing so. And we just know that there's so many places around the world where people don't feel safe to do any of that, scientists and journalists alike. And there's this really good interview with Ta-Nehisi Coates recently on the Long Form podcast. And if you want to hear journalists talk more, the Long Form podcast is really good, and they're all talking about their process. But he was saying, like, we don't have the luxury to be safe and not speak up. Like, we are lucky to be in this position, scientists and journalists alike, that we do have the ability to speak up. And everyone is doing the work they're doing for a reason, and everyone wants to have it out there, show why it's important, change at least one person's mind. And some of the stories I've written, like, I get that feedback from that one reader where it changed their mind or changed their life. And I think any scientist or researcher would feel just as amazing to know that that happened.
Thank you. So we've covered a lot of ground. We have talked about how scientists can engage with journalists by bringing authenticity and passion, their whole human self, and sharing with the journalist, why do you care about your particular research area that you're studying. We've talked about relationship building and building trust, how to contribute to ethical storytelling. And Kunu, I love your story about breaking the dam, and I think that's a really amazing analogy for what Compass has been doing here and does generally. It's breaking down barriers between scientists and storytellers, whether those are storytellers in policy and journalism, other types of multimedia. I think that's a really lovely analogy for, us breaking down those barriers, and I hope that all of you will have the opportunity to interact with storytellers as you go through this conference. So great. And I also, Danielle, I loved your aha and aha. That was fantastic. Also, that good people make for good stories. That was amazing. Bringing your heart to stories and also your humility. We've covered a lot of ground. We've been on quite a journey. How are we doing for time, Bob? We're great. Okay. So do we want to invite any audience questions?
Sure.
Okay. Does anyone have questions to ask of the panel? Yes.
Sorry, my name is Risa Smith. I work with the World Commission on Protected Areas. I was really struck, I have to ask this question because Stephanie, you mentioned how lucky we are to be able to even have this conversation. And I agree with that. But it hasn't actually always been that way, even in Canada. And I do remember, I'm going to say this because I shouldn't, but we had very recently a government that told people who worked in government they weren't allowed to talk to the media. And I'm just wondering how, as journalists, in a country where you are sometimes threatened, even here, actually, but nothing like in other places, how you can tell a story or how you get around that when people are directed not, like scientists particularly, directed not to tell their stories. And you could have experienced that right here just 10 years ago.
I feel like all of us could kind of speak to that, and you especially with that story you wrote. But just a quick response, yeah, it's totally true. Like within any one country, there's still and here in particular, there's still a really wide variety. Like every scientist/journalist is in a completely different position of their safety, right? Our positionality is really important in how safe we feel, who our employer is, and how society perceives us. So in particular, women who are visibly of color are having a much harder time than me talking about the exact same issues. So the positionality really, really matters, and who your employer is. So that's totally true. And as for speaking to people who don't feel safe speaking to the media, it is really hard. I think you could speak to, scientists have been afraid to talk to journalists before, and some still are. And that might mean off-record conversations that can look a variety of different ways. That can look like people leaking stuff to journalists because they don't feel like they can attach their name to it, or trying to find someone who will do at least be a confidential source where they're not anonymous. The journalist knows who they are, but they go under a pseudonym if they fear being fired. There's a bunch of different ways, but it takes that time and that trust for sure. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you want to add something about this story.
Yeah, I mean, that really touched a nerve for me because during that era that you're speaking about, I wrote an investigative story for Nature on the muzzling of Canadian government scientists, and it was very difficult to find people willing to speak to me because they were understandably really scared. But ultimately I was able to find people that were either retired or were able to speak to me with anonymity, and that's how we were able to do that story. But yeah, it's a very, very important point that you're making. Would anyone else like to speak to that?
I think
Okay.
you said it all.
Great. Any other questions from the audience?
Yo himas Waymax Kwawini Sasam I'm really glad to see that some Native people on the panel, and we do have ancient stories. My English name is Frank Brown. My Hiltsuk name is Gladly Asila. From that village he talked about, where our people lived for over 14,000 years of continuous occupation. And in the story, Nula is the oldest relative, and Nulu is the name of the past. So there's a geographic reference. I was an advisor to Biodiversity BC, First Nations advisor on this very topic during the International Year of Biodiversity. And we had knowledge keepers that gathered, and I said, in all due respect, scientists were grappling with the very question that you've raised about how do we engage with the public with biodiversity loss. And these knowledge keepers said, we don't have a word for biodiversity, but what we have is our core values that have sustained us all through time. And those core values are stories, practices, language, and maps. That's what we use to validate in the face of Western science. So there's both a combination of Western empirical process and traditional ecological knowledge. We wrote this paper called the Coastal First Nations Fundamental Truths regarding sustainability, stewardship, and biodiversity conservation. And so biodiversity and cultural diversity directly mirror each other. And that's where our resiliency comes from. And so that knowledge informs the very question that humanity is currently grappling with on how we will move forward as the human family. So I appreciate the opportunity to witness this conversation. I won't be here. I'm from Bella Bella, up the coast, and I just came down for an announcement that's happening tomorrow for the media people. A little bit of a heads up. The Prime Minister of Canada is going to be there, and we've been working hard for over 20 years to fight to preserve the coast and what they refer to as the Great Bear Rainforest. So I came down to listen, took the evening to do this before going to the thing tomorrow, and then I'm going back up to my village. But I just wanted to say this is very important work. This is very important work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Okay, I think, is there one more question? No? Okay, I think what follows this is a reception, so I would invite all of you to come and talk to us and address your questions in person. We're happy to talk to you. I hope you've learned something here, and I hope that next time NACCB does this conference that more people have their hands up saying that they had a 10 out of 10 experience in interacting with media. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Hi, everyone. Before you all leave, by the way, I'm Bernie. Good to meet everyone. Thank you. So happy to put faces to so many emails. Thank you for keeping up with me the last few months. First off, I'd like to thank Compass again for organizing this amazing session, and to all of our panelists, thank you again so much. I have the pleasure of running through some final logistics for today's reception. So, as was mentioned, you're all invited to our reception. It is taking place in the 4th floor of this building in the gallery, patio, and lounge. So it's on the 4th floor, other side of the building. Food is located inside of the gallery, patio, and lounge, but you're free to take a plate and then move onto the outdoor patio, or rooftop patio. That's also on the 4th floor, but on the opposite side of the building. So lots of space for you to roam around. The only thing that the nest has asked us to keep in mind is that alcoholic beverage need to stay inside of the nest. And then once you're done with your food, if you can just leave it on top of one of the buzzing tables, that would be fantastic for the folks that are helping clean up afterwards. And then I think we had one slide left that we wanted to put up, maybe? No? For a few events tomorrow? Nope. There we go. Cool. So I wanted to mention we have all of these amazing events tomorrow. A lot of these are part of our new transformational learning elements that Becky was talking about before. You'll also notice that we have a few coffee breaks and lunch up here. So I also wanted to mention the logistics for those two. So all of our breaks and lunch will be taking place both at the gallery patio and lounge, but there will also be a table with food in our exhibitor hall. So I encourage everyone to split up into both locations so that you're not all going to the same place. We won't have any disposable plates during any of these sessions. So if you're gonna take a plate, we only ask that you keep it inside of this building, or if you go outside to the vicinity of the nest, just bring it back after you're done eating. Okay? Perfect. Thank you all so much.